Welcome to Brandstorm, the podcast that talks to the people behind America's brands. I'm Dan Trzynski, president of Platypus Advertising and Design.
And I'm Nancy Christopher, PR director at Platypus. We all know beer made Milwaukee famous, but it was bowling that made it fun. In bowling's heyday, Milwaukee was America's 10-pin capital. Across the nation, bowling leagues ruled, and Americans tuned in every weekend to watch the PBA Tour on TV. But that all changed in the 1980s. Manufacturing plants started closing, fewer leagues were created, and many bowling alleys shut their doors. But is bowling making a comeback? There does seem to be a resurgence in bowling's popularity, and here to talk about it is the commissioner of the Professional Bowling Association, Tom Clark. It's great to have you with us, Tom.
It is great to be here. Thank you very much. And beer and bowling still go together, I can tell you
They
that.
really
No question.
do. They really do.
I bowl every week in a league near Milwaukee in Muskego at Alpine Lanes every Wednesday night. And I can tell you, I usually bowl better after one spotted cow.
Is
Doesn't
that
doesn't everybody?
It's part of my whole strategy.
Is there
every
extra
week.
pressure on the president of the PBA being in the league that
A
you're
little
in?
bit.
You know, I mean, like, is there like this expectation that
I think the first couple years of our league, everybody kind of looked at me funny and thought I was judging them or something. And I think, but now at this point, I'm just one of the guys. Yeah,
okay.
and it's a lot of fun. And the guys in my league like to talk about the PBA, and so it's cool. And they usually beat me. I'm okay. I'm pretty good. I'm about a 200 average bowler.
well,
but
that's pretty good.
Good
I'm
for
pretty
you.
good, but there's guys in my league that are better than me. So.
And what was the saying? When I first came to town, they used to say beer, bowling, brats, and baseball.
That's right.
So it was all B's.
I'm a fan of all of them. So
Right.
I'll tell you, that's probably the number one thing about bowling is it's really down to earth, and it's really for everybody, and anybody can play it, and anybody can have fun, and we should be really unapologetic about beer, brats, and baseball and bowling, and that stuff's all
Exactly.
great.
Right. Well, I know in my introduction, I kind of gave everyone the Reader's Digest version of bowling history. Tell us a little bit more about what really happened, Tom.
Yeah, well, you're right that bowling was hugely popular, and about 10 million people actually in the country would bowl regularly in leagues, reaching its apex in about 1980. And today there's more like 2 million that bowl every week in a league. So the way people bowl has changed a lot. It used to be all league-based, and people would always get together every single week to bowl. And today, that's not as easy to do with the way people live and the lifestyles and the way society is today. So more people bowl maybe less frequently and not on a schedule today as they used to. Being able to commit, to a 36-week league and meet every week is tough for people. It's tough for me. That's why our team is a 3-player team, but we have 5 guys
That
on our
rotate.
team, and we rotate
Yep.
because there's some weeks I won't be able to be there this week, for example. So we've had to get creative with that. And also, another big thing that changed was the real estate values of where bowling centers were all around the country. And owners of bowling centers, proprietors, woke up one day and were able to sell their land for a really nice amount of money, and so they looked at the proposition there, and a lot of them did sell, so there are fewer bowling centers. And then from a television standpoint in the PBA, in 1997, we had been on ABC television every Saturday afternoon for
It was
30
crazy,
years.
yeah.
Everybody remembers it. Chris
Absolutely.
Schenkel was our
Yeah.
announcer, and he's one of the greats. And our Player of the Year award is named after Chris Schenkel. I mean, we're the only sport, I think, that has its announcer is the title of our Player of the Year award. And no one apologizes for that. We all idolized him. But that ended in 1997, along with, the continuation of the choices available to people in media and the ability for networks and cable networks to broadcast all sports, other sports, more easily than they had in the past. It used to be something like bowling was great for TV because it was pretty inexpensive. You just had to point
Set
a
up the
couple
camera,
cameras,
right.
It was very expensive to do a football game, or a baseball game, and as those expenses came down and the satellites and everything improved and more networks, now all of a sudden every college football game is televised. So being on a Saturday afternoon was tougher competition, So, and I think that maybe bowling got a little comfortable as well and didn't really evolve with the times as fast as it could have, even though it previously had been ahead of the times when it came to televised sports. But we see a lot of that changing now today.
So what do you think's changed? What's the cause for this resurgence?
Well, I think what everybody ends up figuring out is that bowling is fun, no
Right.
matter what,
No
any
question.
era, any day. And I think people are figuring out ways to make it more fun. And so they're devising bowling centers that cater to new tastes, and it makes it more exciting. So you have now today 70 million people a year bowl at least once, and almost 25 million or more bowl more than once or every month. And a lot of times it's just for fun, but the competitive side is also picking up, particularly with the youth. There are more kids today taking bowling very seriously. There's more college bowling. There's high school bowling. My son actually is about to start. He's in 10th grade at Muskego High School, and he's about to start on the Muskego High School bowling team. The season starts here coming up.
Congratulations.
I'll tell you, you really learn about how to get nervous when you watch your kids compete in any sport. But I thought,
Hey, do you yell at it at the side on the sidelines?
yeah, I try to stay quiet. I tell you, that's tough. I mean, that's a tough one. But bowling's a fun sport to watch when you really care about what's going on, and it's kind of our job with the PBA is to make people care about the professional side and the great professional bowlers, so that they have a rooting interest and our audiences can grow.
So in 2000, the PBA Tour was bought by people that were really from the high-tech industry, from
Yeah.
Microsoft. So what attracted them to this, and give us a little bit of that story.
Well, there were three great guys, and one of them in particular, Chris Peters was his name. And if you work on Microsoft Word or Excel, he basically wrote that software. I mean, this guy has touched all of our lives. He's an incredibly brilliant, person.
Yeah.
And he took a liking to bowling. And he put bowling lanes in his house, and he had a goal, and he said, I want to be a pro bowler. And the more he started bowling, the more he looked into the PBA, and he realized that, you know what, he could own the whole thing. He got two of his friends who are also great, legendary really, in the high-tech world, and Rob Glazer and Mike Slade are their names, got them together, and they're big sports fans too, and they said, we can own the whole PBA. And the reason why that was interesting to them or compelling for them is that, very rarely could you own an entire league
right.
and every single aspect of it, from the competition to the media aspect to the sales. And so they believed they could build a value, and they liked bowling. So that really saved the PBA, and it saved bowling in general, that they came along at a time when things were at their leanest
Right.
in the game.
And what changed? How did they help things?
Well, they created a better relationship with ESPN. We were always on ESPN from 1979, from the inception of ESPN, until this year, actually. But in 2000, they created a better relationship. They had better connections with ESPN, and so we were able to schedule more regularly. They were able to change around the formats of the events to create stars in a better way. They invested in the staging of the events so that they looked a little more modern. They definitely invested in the high-tech side of it, not only the website, but digital streaming. It wasn't digital then, was it? It was like,
Right,
when they
right.
first,
Right.
they were on the cutting edge of dial-up, internet streaming sports. We were
Sure.
one of the first to do it. And that was really because of them. Their thought was, we can broadcast or webcast not only the television show and the finals at the end, but the entire tournament. So, they brought a lot of energy and a lot of investment into making sure the PBA had a chance.
They were probably ahead of their time from a sponsorship standpoint because, as an advertising agency, it's like, okay, well, I understood ratings and the PBA Tour and ABC and Chris Schenkel and all of this stuff, but now all of a sudden this sport it's streaming? Back in 2000, that was kind of unheard of. What were those challenges like?
Yeah, it was, I think that their goal was subscription-based, and, it still is today. We've progressed since then, and today we have an incredible new relationship with a firm called Flow Sports, FLO Sports, and flowbowling.com is our new digital home, and it's amazing. They have cameras on every single lane, so you can watch any player you want at any time, and they support it with social media and a website, and so they become a digital partner that only happened because we were on the cutting edge back in 2000, and then about 10 years ago, we started a revamped digital product on New Lion, was our platform host, and it was called Extra Frame. And we sold subscriptions to that ourselves and grew it to over 10,000 subscribers, paying to watch, the best bowlers in the world on a very, 1,000 hours a year. And so that product progressed to the point where a Flow Sports would want to invest in it today. So that what it does is it caters to the hardcore bowling fan. And I think that you see almost every sport getting there now.
Well, I think it makes it easier to score, too. Makes it a lot simpler. Tom, what does a commissioner do?
Well, a little bit of everything. I mean, I think ultimately the way I look at it is I'm responsible for everything, not only the competition and the competition formats and the way that we stage events and the way that we acquire and cater to sponsors, and probably most of all, acquire and cater to fans. I think fans are the most important thing in any professional sport. So I always have my eye on it as a fan, and I think that that's easy for me because I am a fan, and I've been a fan of bowling my whole life. And we talked about the 70s and,
Earl Anthony and Pete Weber and Johnny Petraglia.
Yeah, Marshall Holman, Mark Roth. They were my favorite bowlers, and today, Mark Roth is a friend of mine. Marshall Holman's one of my good friends. We bowl on the same team together at the USBC Open, and it's just cool to be able to know those guys, and they still love the game and want it to succeed, and I think they appreciate a real fan, being involved in the day-to-day of the PBA. So, I think my job changes every day as to what the priorities are, and this year the biggest priority was to elevate our media rights and find a digital partner like Flow and find a TV partner that would invest in our product. And that's why we are going to move to Fox in 2019. And it was a big decision and a big year for us to move from ESPN to Fox, but they gave us the best chance to take this to another level.
Who are we talked about those legends, but star power is obviously a driver of most major sports. Who are those stars of today?
Well, we've had a great few years where the game has really changed, and it's become it's an amazing. If anybody only watched pro bowling in the 80s and then woke up today and watched it, they would be blown away. It would almost look like a space age, sport, because we have styles of bowlers, guys bowling with two hands on the ball and hooking the ball across the whole lane, and the pins explode in ways that they never did before. And we have players from all over the world now. That's a big difference from back in the day. And the guy that really embodies all of that is a player named Jason Belmonte, who's from Australia. And he bowls using two hands, so he's completely revolutionized the sport, because if you go watch a kids tournament today, you'll see all these kids bowling two-handed. And back in the day, you would have thought that was insane.
Right.
Or what's wrong with, why isn't he bowling correctly? And now you think, well, maybe it's the most effective form of bowling, because a guy like Jason Belmonte has won the PBA Player of the Year award 4 of the last 5 years and really been dominant. He's won 9 major championships in just about 9 years on the PBA Tour. Now there's more and more of these two-hand players, but there's just as many players that use one hand or left-handed, or the amount of styles in the game is exciting.
There was a moment on TV that was captured in 2011. Josh Blanchard, his slip and fall, and that's now the topic of a Google ad.
Right. Yeah. I was just watching the World Series. It was during the commercial came on during the World Series. Thankfully, Josh, who was a good friend and a great player on the PBA Tour still today.
But there was a great tie into that. What exactly happened?
Well, no, you know what? That commercial is a little false because
it is?
no phone went off when he. It's a commercial.
How perfect!
It's a commercial that shows people and moments being ruined by a phone going off. So, in other words, if my phone went off right now, I'd ruin this podcast type of thing. And so, Google is, they've come up with a new phone that you can flip over and the phone won't ring or whatever. So that's what they're selling. But there was a big crash. Josh Blanchard's hand stuck in the ball during the World Series of bowling. And a few years ago, and he fell down, and it was like, you'd never seen anything like this in bowling, and he went down. So what Google did was they must have liked that clip or remembered it, and then they put a phone ring on the background to make it seem like that's what screwed him up, but it really didn't.
Very funny.
It really, for him, that was the first time he bowled on TV, and it's extremely nerve-wracking for a player to perform under that pressure. And so, it was really sad when it happened, because you're always, as in my position, I'm always rooting for the young guys, to do well in their first times. I'm sitting next to his wife at the show, and his hand stuck in the ball, and he didn't let go of it, and his foot stepped in the oil on the lane, and he tripped and fell, and it was really very sad, and I didn't know how Josh would respond from that, but he went on to win 2 PBA titles so far, and I'm sure he'll win more. So he's made the most of that opportunity and doesn't look upon it really as an embarrassing moment anymore.
I'm sure he's going to enjoy watching the ad, though.
He's seen it, yeah.
So how has the PBA influenced newer bowling facilities and the popularity of bowling? I mean, there's obviously a resurgence, but what's the PBA's role in that?
I don't know that at this point the PBA has influenced the new modern center as much as the new modern center influencing us.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I obviously, identified the locations that have created great communities with bowling centers that are set up differently than the old traditional center that would usually host a PBA event. So my goal and my direction that I put on for myself really was, we're going to get PBA events in those types of centers. And what everybody would say, and these are fun centers, and they are like boutiques, and high-end food and high-end cocktails and dark lights and big screens and a lot of fun. And, so they're really not the typical league bowling locations. And what most people said to me when I wanted to move into those types of centers is, you can't do that. You can't possibly hold a PBA event in a bowling center that only has 10 lanes or 8 lanes or doesn't cater to the sports side of the game, because bowling is an unusual game in that it has the recreational side and the sports side. And so what we've really proven over the last few years is, yes, we can bring the PBA into those types of bowling centers. We can stage television events on 2 lanes. We don't need 32. We don't need 64 lanes. We can do the whole event on 2 lanes. And probably like how Belmonte embodies the modern player and is the new star of the game, the location that embodies the new direction of the PBA is actually in Portland, Maine, a place called Bayside Bowl that was only a 10-lane center. But when I first went there and visited this bowling center, you met the community, and they were having so much fun bowling. They bowl in costumes, they're chanting, they have a DJ come in when they bowl, and they were having so much fun. The idea was, how can we get a PBA event in here? So we created something called the PBA League, and it's team matches featuring professional bowlers, and it's become really one of the most popular stops on the PBA Tour for the players, for the fans. Everybody wants to be there. It really shows well on television. And that's one example of how we've brought the PBA into those centers. And real fast, I'd say the other one that really helped us move into those bowling centers was, we created this event called the Chris Paul PBA Celebrity Invitational. And Chris Paul is an NBA superstar. He plays for the Houston Rockets now. He was with the Clippers, was with the New Orleans Hornets. And he loves bowling. So we figured out a way to involve him in a celebrity PBA event, and we brought that event to places like Lucky Strike Lanes, another type of chain that normally would not be associated with the PBA. We just don't fit, but we do fit when we want to put on a great event, and pro bowlers can bowl anywhere. They can bowl in any lanes at any time. So that was really fun. And so we've kind of been the ones that are integrating into the new style more so than them being influenced by us.
You're also doing a lot with racing as well.
Yeah, the bowling industry has partnered and done a great job. The bowling industry rallying cry or slogan is "Go Bowling," which is really fits.
Sure.
It's perfect. And Go Bowling has sponsored NASCAR races for the last few years, the Go Bowling 400. Or they sponsor cars. They have drivers, that wear the Go Bowling logos. And they have found that the audiences overlap, in a way that works.
There is a natural synergy between those two sports from a standpoint of even the golf tour too. It's an individual versus the team, the Packers, the Broncos, the whoever. This is Earl Anthony or
Yeah, and it's more of
a
like
new
a
guy
touring sport
where you've got to make it or break it, and just like in NASCAR, I mean, they have individual. Although they've gotten more into the big teams where there's 5 or 6 big teams, and then drivers that work for them. Is it difficult for the individual bowler to find sponsorship to be able to get to tournament to tournament? I mean,
it should be better.
Is the money in the game enough to make it work for them?
It does. It's an area that needs to improve. I think that the area of sponsorship where our top players have done well is with bowling ball companies.
Right.
There's some major brands like a Brunswick or Ebonite or Storm or Motive, and those brands of bowling ball attach themselves to professional bowlers effectively, and they effectively become their top sponsors. But it's really an untapped market where more mainstream companies or brands, when they do figure it out that they should sponsor PBA bowlers, they will get a lot of bang for their buck.
Yeah, why couldn't a pizza company or
Supercuts
there's
been
or
some,
somebody like
Well,
that?
don't you also have some new shirts? They look different. They're
Yes, yeah, that was
Tell us
what
about that.
we came into that, and actually in the high five jerseys are our official jersey of the PBA, and High Five is a Wisconsin company. And it was started here, and so we wanted to introduce that look to bowling. That's kind of like NASCAR. It's a dye sublimated jersey, so it's not just a golf shirt with a patch on it. It gives the player 2 opportunities: one, to define themselves with a design that talks to their personality, and then 2, to be more effective for sponsors. So they have several spots on their jerseys where they can sell, including the big main chest area. And it's a valuable spot because when a PBA bowler is on national television, the audiences are still large, and a bowler is on television with a close-up for minimum 20 minutes straight and possibly 2 hours straight if they're on an entire telecast.
Right.
And so, that doesn't happen in football. You don't even know what half the players look like with a helmet on. And in bowling, you get to know that player better than really almost any other sport because of the focus on one individual and how they perform under pressure. So a sponsor latching on to a player will really work for them.
How do sponsors best find players and get involved? Do these guys have agents, or can they contact you through the league to say, hey, I'm interested in attaching myself to the brand in some way?
Yeah, well, mostly they would contact us. They can contact the players directly. All of our players are really social media savvy, and reaching out to them is not difficult. I think that when we reach out to different sponsors about coming on board with the PBA, we always entertain them the opportunity to put their logo on a certain number of players. They earn the right to get onto a certain number of players, and then those relationships have the potential to grow. So they don't really have agents yet, the players, to the degree that other sports do, which there's a double-edged sword there. It's great, to be able to work directly with the player, but the player would probably rather have that representation. But working with representatives, as I know from working in other sports, is not always the most fun thing to do.
Right.
But no, I think the goal the PBA has is that every player will have an agent at some point, and every player will be, able to capitalize on the exposure that they have because of the PBA.
One other initiative that you've been working on is the Olympics. Is bowling going to be in the Olympics?
Yeah, I tell you, that's a sore subject for me because
I'm sorry.
Hell, curling's in it.
It's ridiculous that bowling is not in the Olympics. It's stupid.
Right.
It makes no sense. It should be in the. I won't watch the Olympics until bowling is back in the Olympics. I'm done with it. we had a great chance to be in the 2020 games in Tokyo. Bowling is huge in Japan. We actually have a PBA Japan where we hold weekly tournaments. Yeah, it's great. And we do one big event together every year called the DHC PBA Japan, where all our top players go over and have a competition. We've had Japan PBA events for 20, 30 years, and they really respect the game and understand it, and they have a large base. It's similar to the way it is in the U.S. in Japan.
So what happened?
So we thought, well, we were a finalist to get in, and ultimately they went different direction. They put surfing in, they put roller games, and some other form of karate, I believe, and so that was pretty frustrating because we have a group called World Bowling that's their driving interest, and we really support them. The PBA supports them, and We have an event called the PBA World Series of Bowling, where we have minimum 26 countries participating at the highest level of the game. And the PBA World Series of Bowling really would be bigger than bowling in the Olympics, actually. People don't recognize that just because the word Olympics is so big. But the PBA World Series of Bowling is on national television for 5 straight events, and we have the greatest competition that there is, and the best players from around the world come and compete in it. But it's the best evidence that the game should be in the Olympic Games. And so many people identify with bowling and understand it. And it's not just for a while, people made the argument that it was just an American sport, and that's what hurt its chances.
But it's not.
It's not
I mean, it comes from all over. If you look at the ancient history of bowling, not the
Egypt.
Modern history.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, Egypt, Germany, the Greeks, they were all involved in bowling way back when.
Every single continent has players. I mean, I was just talking to a guy from South Africa who's a really great player on the PBA now. And, Europe, last week in Tulsa, the player that won our event in Tulsa, his name's Stuart Williams. He's from England. And we have players from Finland, and we have, all over the world. Obviously, the top players from Australia, and plus the U.S. is huge in bowling and is still the number one country, really, by far. And we have solid television ratings here and evidence of being on national TV for almost 60 years in a row. And that's the types of things that the Olympics says they look for, are things like success on television and worldwide appeal. And
was it ever in the Olympics? Because you'd think it would have been.
It was a demonstration sport once, about 30 years ago. And that's the extent of bowling being in the Olympics. So I think it will be one day. I mean, we haven't given up, but I'm not happy about it. Like I mentioned, Chris Paul, he's one of the greatest athletes that ever lived, and he's a bowler. And Chris, every time I talk to him, he says, bowling in the Olympics, yeah, this is ridiculous. It's a joke. It's a sport. And he's played in the Olympics on the basketball team several times and won gold medals. And he can't believe bowling's not in the Olympics either. So it's not all on bowling. It's also on the Olympics, to make the right decision.
So we have a lot of tourism-related people listening to this podcast. How would a destination marketing organization get on your radar for bringing a PBA event to their city? Because getting sports events to cities is definitely on their radar, and maybe they're not going to, they're a city that doesn't have a professional football team and I noticed your tour is in a lot of what we'd call second-tier markets. And Milwaukee used to host a huge, the Miller was a staple. And now there is no event here.
Yeah, we've come in and out. We were here a couple of years ago, and definitely would like to bring one back for sure soon, and I think we will. But it's really easy to get in touch with us. I mean, pba.com, and you can find how to contact, and that's pretty simple. And we have a pretty solid representation on social media where it's easy to find the Professional Bowlers Association on Facebook or on Twitter at PBA Tour, and so reaching out.
And they can make a pitch. Are you looking for cities?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. We want to go anywhere that wants us, and we can. We're extremely, the things that make us appealing to cities and groups like that is we're very flexible. We're able to say, okay, what works for you, and we can make our organization fit into that. Like I was explaining earlier about, well, we only have this small bowling center. Well, we can do a certain kind of event there. And we can still bring it there. Well, we want to fill room nights, so we want to make sure we have more people coming to our town. Well, we can have a big event and bring 300 different players into a city if that's the case, and we can explain to you how we do that. Well, we want national television. No problem. We can do that. Or we don't want television. We just want, well, we can do that with digital stuff. We have an entire regional tour where we do 150 events around the country every year that are more like weekend local events. And those are great opportunities for small towns with a smaller budget. A good example is Aurora, Illinois came on. So they wanted to bring the PBA to town. And we started with a regional, and it's grown now to be a larger national event. So, there's so many different opportunities, and we have so much flexibility. And appreciate really communities that want us, that we will make it happen. It's just a matter of connecting.
I can't think of a nicer guy to work with. Thanks for coming here today. You were great.
Well, thank you very much. I love talking about bowling.
No question.
If I listen to this,
you can tell your passion.
Well, I'd want to go bowling right now. Actually.
Right.
Let's go.
So,
And to our listeners, if you like what you've heard today, please don't forget to share, review, and subscribe to Brandstorm.
this is Dan Jasinski along with Nancy Christopher at Platypus Advertising and Design, an awesome company that creates perceptions that influence choice for a variety of regional, national, and even global brands on a daily basis. We hope you'll join us next week for another episode of Brandstorm.